Well, I wonder who's the most excited about this right now. I want to say it's probably Ben, but Jess also is very excited.
Um, we've officially gone full circle because it was actually Jess after one of our first podcasts that recommended I read Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability. And so reading that, and then obviously Mags, I passed that on to you, and then here we are with the rest of her works. And since reading Dare to Lead, I've actually really enjoyed that, in Audible, where I do all my reading / listening, all the recommended books now that are coming up. It's like Daring Greatly and Rising Strong, and all it's like add to wish list, add to wish list, add to wish list. So I feel like it's going to be a very Brene Brown year.
And to go full circle, I then recommended it to Laura.
And I bought this for my mom for Christmas, so it's gone very full circle.
Spreading the joy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess let's just jump right into it. I've never done a book club before, so we're just going to kind of roll with it. And hopefully the conversations that we're having today can continue in the comments, in our Facebook group, probably post this on the YouTube. So anyone who wants to join in on the conversation, please feel free to do so below. So today we have here Ben and myself, MTMM coaches, and then we also have Jess Coral, who is a longtime friend of the MTMM podcast and current appearance record holder. She's also the owner of Project Better. So we'll link that below if you want to check it out as well. And then we also have Laura. She's a longtime MTMM client of mine, community member, and she is a wizard when it comes to hacking recipes to make them more macro friendly. Also a wizard when it comes to meal prepping for 1 to 2 people, and also for people who work the classic 9-to-5 job. So she's got lots of tips and tricks that you'll be seeing more and more of. So anyways, let's get to it. I think we're going to kind of go through what everyone's favorite theme was of the book. And we're going to try and get through everything today, have a good conversation, but try and keep it to about 15 to 20 minutes. This is for Ben to try and keep them under wraps. But how about Ben, you kick us off and let us know what one of your favorite themes is.
Yeah, I was just saying before, like, I instantly regretted when I was talking to Maggie about what we should talk about, as the words, "Oh, we'll just all choose one theme," were coming out of my mouth. I was like, no, not just one, not just one. I think Brené Brown obviously has a number of themes that seem to be pretty consistent through all of her writing. And I think that it just goes to show really how much of an appetite there is within the community for the stuff that she writes about. But the ability to be vulnerable and really not see it as a weakness, but understand that it's not, a choice between being courageous and being vulnerable, that they're actually exactly the same thing, and that vulnerability can't exist and courage can't exist without the other. For me, it was probably the most important thing, or most important theme, and definitely something that I really enjoy reading and obviously thinking a lot about too. And she goes on to use a heap of examples, and a lot of what I really liked about Dare to Read, and why I pushed Mags sort of to go this way, is because of the application that we get into the work that we do as well. And especially given the specificity of what we do and how difficult a lot of the conversations we are having with clients are surrounding, their ideas of self-worth and who they think they are, and how that kind of extrapolates out to their choices and behaviors. Being able to be comfortable as coaches to allow that space for those kind of conversations is something that's super integral to being able to create an environment that is conducive for success to our clients. And so I guess this kind of book in particular has almost been a handbook, but that ability to, and sometimes being courageous as well doesn't mean you have to come up with the answers all the time, but being able to kind of sit in that uncomfortable, sometimes whether it be silence or that uncomfortable space where someone's sort of laying everything out in front of you, and know that it's okay that you can't answer all the questions, but just to be able to listen to them, I think for me was probably the most profound sort of theme that she runs through in the book, I think.
Mm-hmm. And kind of building on that, I'm actually kind of jumping to what the biggest hard-hitting quote was for me. And that was one around empathy. And the quote was, "Empathy is not connecting to an experience. Empathy is connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience." So going back to what you were saying, Ben, like having those really tough conversations, or at least opening the space to have those tough conversations with clients, I think we oftentimes do want to jump to having the solution, or do want to jump to being able to, solve whatever problem it is that they are experiencing. And I think sometimes we feel like we need to be able to completely understand what they're going through in order to do that. And I don't think, like, from what, the Brené Brown has gone into, is that's not the case, right? You just need to be able to be vulnerable enough to put yourself kind of in their shoes, but it doesn't mean you have to act or almost pretend like you've been there before, or that you understand what they're going through. And I thought that was a pretty valuable lesson that I took away, and probably will be carrying forward with me in my practice, I guess you could say, for a long time to come, and hopefully building on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon that my top quote that I'd written down is just on the back of all of that, which is sympathy is feel for me, feel for me, and can be condescending, where empathy is feeling like with me. And I think, like you said, we sometimes try and fix people or fix the situation or find a solution, but sometimes it's just like being deep down, like in that dark place, crying with like the people in our life or clients or members, whoever, but just being there and not trying to fix a situation, which is really hard to do because we're all in this industry to help people. And sometimes the best thing we can do is just sit and listen and feel with them until they kind of come through it as well. And that's a really good lesson, because it's as a problem fixer and and things like that, you really want to help them. But I think, like, from taking away from that book, I'm just like, oh yeah, man, that's exactly what it is like just getting down, having a cry, feeling the feels, like going to get a burger, like all of that stuff. It's like, it's the best. And I think she does such a good job of just, I don't know if it was in Dare to Lead, but in one of her books, she talks about like not being able to make it home for her daughter's last soccer game ever as high school. And her book publisher just like, doesn't say, oh, we can do this, but they're like stuck in an airport and they just sit down and cry together in like a bookstore. And I'm like, oh, like so good, like so reassuring that we don't have to try and always fix people, which is great.
Yeah. And I think, in a lot of those situations there isn't a fix. And so when somebody's there kind of, preaching to you that, oh, well, try this or try that or try this, when really you're just trying to accept that there is no way to fix the situation and you have to kind of get through it. She really makes room or teaches you how to make room for that to happen.
Well, she would go on to say in that situation that we're trying to give a fix because we're uncomfortable, and we're just kind of projecting that we think they're uncomfortable and we're trying to fix that, but it's not. It's that like, I don't know how to handle this conversation. You'll be right. And then like tap on the shoulder and like, let's just get on with it, sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that comes back to like the perfectionism as well. Like I related a lot to when she talks about perfectionism as a defense mechanism. And I think I felt that a lot in my life of like needing to have that right answer and needing to have a fix, especially at work. If you're ever seen as the expert, like being able to say like, oh, I have the right answer. But one of the quotes that I had written down was that it's more important to get it right than to be right. And I think in those situations too, it's really impactful to just sit with someone and not necessarily have like the right thing to say. It's just about like being there with them and like experiencing it with them.
Ben and I actually just had a similar conversation yesterday.
Her whole philosophy on really like team leading and what that actually means. A lot of it, like, and we talk about like the quotes that really hit hard, like a lot of things that she said, I just like, sort of took my breath away, and I was like, God damn it. Like I know exactly how I do that. And it's little things too. Like, you gotta be, you can't be modeling like burnout, because that's essentially like the culture that you create. And I think for us and the position we're in, when you're in when you do run a small business, there's always 10,000 things to do. And inevitably at least twice a year, I get a tap on the shoulder from Kat, who's like, you know how this ends. Like you're already starting to feel it, like, taking its toll, you know how this ends. And inevitably 2 or 3 times it happens. And actually having Brené Brown to sort of say, it's not about you burning out, it's about you making feel like Maggie and Kat and Claire all have to burn out as well. Like that's the actual issue, has been for me the biggest catalyst to be like, cool, it's 10:30, I'm gonna go to bed now, Or it's, a Saturday and this stuff is not super urgent, but it's a nice day and let's go and take Mateo out to the park or whatever it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, role modeling that is important. And there was actually one thing I was reflecting on and applying it to how Ben and I always have these conversations about, okay, we have tons of ideas. Specifically, Ben always has tons of ideas. He's the ideas person. And we love this. This is great. But, when it comes down to it, we need to balance that idea versus action, right? And if we feel like there's all these ideas piling up and we're not able to action on them or don't really know what direction we're supposed to go in with them, it's difficult to get anything done. So I really liked when Brené Brown was walking through, I think it was called the task approach, TASC. And she referred to it as being, okay, what does done look like? And then she took that even further and said, okay, let's paint done, right? And I think breaking down each individual task or idea that you have and looking, okay, what does this look like when it's done? It then gives, further direction and being able to see like what the end does look like, exactly where you're trying to go. And I also kind of related this back to working with clients and, at the end of a consult, be like, okay, well, great. These are all the things we're going to work on this week. Well, what if a client then walks away and is like, well, what does that even look like? Like, what am I supposed to come back with next week to say, okay, like this is how, I accomplished A, B, C, and D. So I really liked to take that approach and, okay, let's paint what, a successful week would look like. And then let's set up the steps so that we know how we're going to accomplish said successful week. And I've been trying to integrate that into my practice a little bit more. And I think that it is really helpful. I even, sorry, last thing I'll say about this point, but I went to my first, sorry. I went to my first counseling therapy appointment last week. And I asked her, I was like, I need to walk away from this knowing what I need to do over the next 2 weeks before we meet again, so that I can feel like I come back and I'm getting, the most out of this experience. Rather than just walking away and be like, I feel great. And then the next day being like, wait, what was the point of that? So she didn't give me homework. That's what we were calling it that day. But I asked her, like, moving forward, I would like some sort of like homework or direction in terms of what to be focusing on until we meet again. Anyways, I'll let somebody else speak now.
Awesome. How great. That's so good.
Yeah, it was, how we always talk about coaches need coaches. She was like, like therapists need therapists. And I guess in a sense, like that is a large part of what we do as nutrition coaches as well. So it is helpful to now have someone, to go to for myself.
Cool.
Awesome, Max.
I think one of the other major themes for me out of this book, are we still have time to talk? We're still going? It's been a while. Okay, cool. Okay, great. The other big theme for me that, and I think as a small gym and now having like seven or eight staff members, was around brave leaders are not quiet around hard things. So, like having that hard conversation. And then like I think she's got a quote that says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I'm not a very confrontational person. And so, sometimes you tiptoe around things and situations instead of, and not just with my team, but even like having, those tough conversations with clients and stuff. But now like, that's pretty much how I live my day to day is, if I'm feeling really uncomfortable about something, I'm like, I should probably have that conversation. I should probably talk about it. And it's not always the most like gracious and smooth talk, and sometimes it stumbles and it's uncomfortable and I'm sweating and red faced and awkward, but I always feel better when it's done. Like I now am a much better, probably I guess, leader and manager with my team and with my clients as let's work through this now, then let it kind of simmer on the surface and just to be a bit more clear around it. And I think when you tie it back to your values and go, well, actually this is what you're doing or what's been done is not taking the things that I want to have around the space and the gym and, looking at that top down approach. If I don't call that out, then it just like, it gets like assumed it's okay. And then that, it reverberates out to others. So I think like she does a lot of stuff around that and, digging in deep and talking, if it's your ego that's having an issue, or if it's really something in your core values that's having an issue. But having that conversation has been a big life-changing thing for me from Brene.
I think it really builds a lot of trust too within relationships. If you're able to have those tough conversations.
That
Absolutely.
clear is kind and kind is clear is one of the ones that I wrote down as well. And I find I've always been told I'm a very like direct person, and I've been told that in like a very negative way, especially around work. And that was something like I always
Sorry, Laura. Don't rock the boat.
I took it really personally over the years. And what I think this like helped me to clarify was that clear is good, but clear doesn't have to be harsh. And clear is, using things like examples and but still creating a safe space when you're having that conversation. So that you're kind of doing both, right? You're creating that trust and that safe space for people to feel vulnerable, and they can be vulnerable, but at the same time, that kind of clear instruction and feedback can help you both accomplish more. I don't think there's anything more frustrating than getting feedback that something's like okay, but like with no clear, fix this or this can be done. So that was, I think, something that I took away as well in terms of like how I speak to people at work and kind of give feedback and receive feedback as well.
I think as a manager, it can be hard to get actual real feedback from staff, right? And that's kind of like part of like what we do with Mags is mentoring is say, look, next week I want you to come up with something that I need to work on. And lucky for me, Maggie feels comfortable with the space that we've provided to be, quite, and not blunt and not harsh, but like direct. And that sort of ideas versus action is one where she says, yeah, this is what you do. And unfortunately, you kind of give me 100 things, but you haven't really given me anything, and it's because that we've been able to have those conversations that things like this book club actually eventuate. Because we can say, well, what is actually important out of this list of 100 that we actually want to in action, and how do we go about doing that? So, I think that, not being direct and kind of, I guess that's a tribute to say that the space at Mags we have created within our team, it's great that we can feel able to do that. But again, she also talks about that, being vulnerable, it still has boundaries. It's not just go in there. And I think she uses that example of the CEO who's like, that's it. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm just going to get up in front of everyone on Monday and tell them that we're hemorrhaging money. I'm way in over my head and I have no idea how to fix it. Right. And she's like, okay, sit down. But the thing that she says from that is, if I'm an investor, like in this guy's company, that's not what I want to hear. But I also hope that he is actually having that conversation with someone who can provide some mentorship or some direction for him, right? And I think that ultimately that is the detriment to that vulnerable and courageous leadership, is that so much of us, particularly in that corporate world, is built on like perception, right? And kind of like Laura said, Laura just said that it's more about getting the right answer than being right all the time. And we've kind of gone the other way a lot of the time in the community, where you feel like your status or your importance is based on how much you know and how right you are. So yeah, sharing with boundaries. Boundaries is huge. Like, and that's probably another thing that she writes a lot about, and setting what those boundaries are, even in terms of just like your own self-respect, right? And the ability to say no, or that doesn't work, and here's why. And again, it doesn't have to be harsh. It just has to be, hey, I've already got plans and I can't do 1,000 things, right?
Yeah.
That was really cool too.
And that was a big one coming out of quarantine too. And well, we've got kind of, some of us have gone back into a bit of a lockdown, but when we were coming out of it at one point, all of these plans and people and hangouts and stuff are like flooding in. And I think that was a really big wake up call. Like, okay, I really do need to like set my boundaries straight and where I want them to be. And maybe those shifted too over having a little bit of a break from socializing over, the quarantine period, but still having a handle on that. Ben, I'm sure, was even more dramatic for you and Jess too, because you were both in like a 6-month lockdown and then came out.
I had the perfect card. Having a 5-month-old is super good. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it. I think it's for us, the lockdown was like a good chance for people to revamp their life and go, who's adding value, who's not adding value, who do I really want to see, who's keeping in contact. I think for us over here, for me personally anyways, it really highlighted what was what's really important, what I want in my life, and who I want around. So, and Ben, you're really lucky. Like, and same with Diego. One of my trainers also had like a newborn, just like the best time ever to be home watching all the cool discovering of the world and trying things and growing and becoming a human. Yeah. I tried to have a baby, but it takes two people, and my partner wasn't having it. So what do you do?
2021.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that maybe appeals to me as well as being a dad is how much Brené Brown actually uses her families as examples. And I think it's a good reminder that, you know, when we're talking about leading, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to own a business or be a manager. It's literally like, if you are part of any kind of team, whether it be a social team, or you have a social network, you know, a group of friends, or even your family, like it's essentially, it's the same thing. And you want your family or your group of friends to be as, you know, themselves as possible. And so getting some ideas on how to set that up and to be able to have those conversations. And I think particularly with a lot of the issues, particularly surrounding like men's health and stuff at the moment, and rates of suicide of young men too, it does hit home that, you know, yeah, you have these group of friends, but really, like, how comfortable are those group of friends having those conversations with you? And I'd be devastated if I thought that, you know, if one of my really close friends didn't feel like they had anyone to chat to. And I think that it's like Brené Brown in general, but particularly Dare to Lead has given me a lot of tools to have some conversations with some friends of mine where it gets down to the crux where, like, some of my mates are genuinely quite lonely, you know. And if we kind of relate that back to the book, and they're talking about I think her name's Dee Dee. She works in the Air Force, and she's talking to the airmen about they're all tired and lethargic, and she says, well, how many of you are tired and how many of you are lonely, right? And being able to sort of have that conversation, like, that one really hit home. But when she uses her daughter, when they're talking about what trust is, and they use the marble jar, right? And I think that that's been a really big one too. Like, you look at the friends that you are closest to, and it's those people that have shown up day after day after day, year after year after year, to keep putting one marble in the jar at a time, that do make up your friendship circle. And so when you do a bit of a stock take, like Jess did during lockdown, it's pretty easy to look across and see whose jar is super jam-packed full of marbles and whose isn't, you know?
I think that marble jar was like a really good, like, kind of thing for me as well. I think sometimes I take trust and vulnerability, and I think that trust is built in these like big moments, and it's like, oh, we're just waiting for something big to happen to show someone that they can trust you. But when I was reading that, I kind of took the step back and was like, okay, but who are the people that I trust and why? And like, what are examples of like people when they put those marbles in the jar? And one like that I thought of in particular to like this community is like anyone that's worked with like an MTMM coach. Like, I think it's the little things that every single week when you're checking in with them and they're, you know, remembering pieces about your life and connecting it to other pieces and like being so, you know, showing that genuine care and connection. That's what's like continually built week over week, because you're not spending like these long hours or long days with the coaches, but like the trust is built so quickly. And that was like a big takeaway, I think, too, with how I want to interact with my friends and what I want to think about always like putting out there as well to each and every one of them.
And I thought it was interesting too, how she talked about breaking trust. And so taking the marbles out of the jar too usually happens in a bigger amount. So we're building that trust with little tiny marbles one at a time. But when trust is broken, you know, the jar can be fully emptied, and it takes that long process again to build the trust back up. Which, you know, it completely makes sense, but I think something we're not always fully aware of. And if we do break trust, or if somebody breaks our trust, you know, we can't really expect it to just go back to the way that it was immediately. But also not giving up hope that you can't rebuild that trust back, right?
Yeah. The marble jar.
The marble jar. Were there any other themes that we didn't touch on that anybody wants to chat a little bit about?
Those are my big ones. I mean, I did write down, I love her, like, self-compassion, talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love. Ben, you kind of said it as well, but it's because it's so easy to get caught up in every day and doing all the things 100% of the time. But the difference between like self-care and healing as well. So I think for me, I mean, Ben knows I go to bed at like 8 o'clock and I do about 10 things to ensure my sleep is perfect. But it's a hard thing to do. I think to always kind of lead by example and be the person that, your dog wants you to be, or others want you to be. And, I think like going back to saying no, like that's such a skill that people need to learn, and it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but that's another kind of like life daily thing I've tried to go and be like, do I actually want to see this person? Do I want to stay up and ruin my sleep schedule for the weekend? And sometimes it's a yes, but not very often, So I think that's a really good thing for everybody, because we don't have enough self-caring and healing in general. And I think you need to kind of shut off the noise to actually hear what's going on. And we're not very good as a society doing that. So yeah.
I think it's a good reminder of how much of the noise you hear you're actually generating yourself, right? Like if I'm trying to make plans with someone and they say, oh, I can't do that weekend, how's the next weekend? I'm not like, oh God, like, oh, this guy can't catch up this weekend. It's like, yeah, sure, next weekend is fine, right? But when the shoe's on the other foot, it's almost like, oh God, like I really want to do this. I don't want to be, I guess maybe as well having a newborn, like I don't want to always be like, oh, I can't, because of Mateo and stuff like that. But at the same time, like the people hopefully that are closest to me, like understand that the circumstances are changing too. And if they're people that have been putting marbles in the marble jar, they're going to get that, right? And it hasn't been an issue, right? It hasn't been an issue saying, hey, dude, would love to, but like 7 o'clock now is like Mateo's bedtime, so not a super easy time for me to come out for dinner, right? And it is one of those things that we tend to, I think, build up way too much. And the actual, like, once it occurs, it's like this relief for both of you, and you make alternate arrangements or you don't, right? So
I think that's a hard one to draw with work too. Like for me, I had a hard time with quarantine with like my laptop being available and like constantly just being able to check it and stuff. And that's not, healthy for me. And it wasn't healthy for me. And I remember talking to Maggie about it, and she was like, well, do you need to check your email after 7? Like if an email comes in, like, do you need to check it? And I had literally never thought to think that, or like that didn't cross my mind when it came to myself. But as soon as it's someone else, I think you have a lot more compassion sometimes. And I think it's important to remember that, and sometimes turn that lens on yourself and make sure that you're showing yourself like the same level of compassion and care that you'd want for other people and those people that you care about as well.
Yeah, quarantine was a doozy. I guess my quote too, which I thought applied a lot during quarantine, was the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression, right? And I think that we probably saw that quite a bit, especially here, Jess, in Melbourne, because it was so many people who I know don't necessarily love the work they do, but love the lifestyle that their job affords them to have. And all of a sudden, all those avenues, whether it be the gym or travel or weekends away or whatever else that they do to kind of balance out that disdain they might have for their work, was all of a sudden taken off the table. And so all they were really left with was this job that maybe they don't really love, and that was it. And so you could sort of see that there was a lot of that really beginning to take the toll, because all of our outlets were gone for a little while. So that's definitely one that's kind of stuck to me as well. And what do we mean by play? And I'm so fascinated by it, which has been something Brené Brown has kind of shone a light on too, is how much research is actually being done on the importance of play for adults. And we know for children, like how important and how vital it is to their like cognitive development. But then it's like we assume, oh, you finish high school and like you're done playing now. Like it's over, your playtime is finished. And I think it's whatever you choose to do that gives you a little bit of joy, laughter, like ability to be a little bit spontaneous. I know for Kat and I, it's the gym. Like it's ribbing each other and like, like taunting each other in the gym for us when we can both have a laugh is fun, and when that's sort of taken away and you're training on your own in the garage, right? It's all of a sudden it's like, training's not all that fun anymore, right? So it's not like playtime. So yeah, that was a big one for me to try to keep into my daily, well, not daily practice, but into my regular practice, is to make sure we are carving some time in the schedule to actually do things for no other reason than just the fact that it's play, and it's fun for us. Right?
I love how her example, Brené Brown's example, was she's like, but things that may look like play aren't necessarily play unless you actually enjoy doing them, and they're not, for any other purpose. And I think the example she gave was like a board game or something with her kids. She's like, that's not play for me and my husband. Like, we don't enjoy that. It's, it looks like play, but it's not. And she gave some examples of what they actually do that's enjoyable. But I thought that was funny too. Like, you don't just force yourself to do something that everyone else is doing that they enjoy to say, you're enjoying your time as well. I think it takes some really conscious and deliberate thought to figure out, okay, what is it that I enjoy? And if you don't have anything that, you are doing that you enjoy that doesn't have any other like productivity purpose, then trying to find something that will serve that, play purpose for you, I think is really important. Yeah.
Jess loves to play. Jess is always playing around.
I am. I'm an enthusiast for life, so I'm always doing weird things.
I love that. I need to take a lesson from you.
I just want to learn all the new skills like juggling, balancing, surfing. I'm just like, let's do it. It's great. I'm actually doing a mountain biking lesson on Monday. First mountain biking lesson ever. Crazy.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
With 9 fingers.
I know. Well, it'll be all right. It's fine. I'll wear a glove, no big deal.
It's just the back break.
Well, I don't know exactly the time here, but I think we went a little bit over, probably.
A little bit.
That's fine.
We're still gonna get to the last question, Mags. We'll do it quickly. Like, how everyone is actually taking some of the lessons or things that they learn and directly, like practically trying to kind of enforce them into their lives.
Yeah. You want to go first, Ben?
I guess that's the point, right? Like, if you're only reading and you're not actually applying, like, that was a cool story, and on to the next one. I guess like
3 minutes left. 3 minutes and 15 seconds. So rapid fire.
All right, perfect. I think like I said, play was probably the big takeaway, making sure that is a regular part of what we're doing. I guess having Mags kind of on the same page, literally, with what we're reading has made it easier to try to bring some of these workplace practices actually into our team as well, which has been super useful. But also the gratitude. Like, I'm on a real gratitude kick at the moment, and starting to do a little bit more journaling and being able to keep front of mind, hey, look, these are the small things that are everywhere that, I am very grateful for, right? Sometimes there's big things that are like super blindingly obvious, but there's always something. And so keeping an eye out for the always somethings, and you actually start to realize really how full your pages can get. Right? So that's mine.
Laura?
Vulnerability was a big one for me, and especially at work. So I want to be more active in creating kind of that safe space for everyone to be vulnerable. I think sometimes I can assume that it's on the, people that I'm working with to feel safe in the kind of meeting room. So what I want to do is kind of actively make those changes and using the phrases like, what does support look like from me? And some of the good examples she gives to really articulate to the team that this is a safe space. And then again, practicing what you're preaching to and making sure that you're showing vulnerability as well.
Cool.
Jess, go ahead.
I've mentioned all the stuff that I'm trying to do, but I guess the big one for me is probably around the hard conversations. Just, it's not a daily practice, but even like yesterday I had this horrible email and I just like killed this lady with kindness, and then she was like, all right, she was super nice back. So I was like, suck it. Where usually I would emotionally like sit on it for a little bit, maybe have a cry. And I was just like, no, like I need to address this. And through love, people first. But that's been a really big resounding theme, because sometimes even things like money and stuff are hard to talk about. So just doing those uncomfortable things and conversations often. Yeah.
Conversation with Tristan upcoming about baby timelines then.
Every week, story of my life.
Maybe I'll bring mine up in the next coaches chat we have, Ben. It wraps into mindfulness, which is our social media theme next month. So I'll say it. Well, thanks everyone for listening and joining, and
nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, you too.
Next one.
And for anyone listening, stay tuned, because we're going to be taking a vote in the next coming days on the next book for February.
Ooh, fun.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks.
Bye. Bye.